Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Um, I have a few things here for y'all. Um, I'm not gonna keep y'all long. I think it's been a little while since I've been live on this side of things. I have been dropping content on my other platforms, but I think it's been a little bit of a while since I dropped something over here. I have a handful of things that I do want to point out here. Um, and the first thing I want to point out is that's a med bar owner hit with a murder charge. Again, shout out to Law and Crime for this. Let's get into it.
You guys remember the Baja Man, right? Okay, let's see how well you fucks know the Baja Man. I'll give it an in here $3,000 if you can tell me how many Baja Men there are. No. The former owner of a Texas med spa and the business's medical director are both facing murder charges after a woman went in for an IV infusion and didn't make it out alive. We are digging into the allegedly dangerous practices going on behind closed doors and why it took years for authorities to bring charges. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, before we go any further, I got to tell you about our partner, our sponsor, this app called Upside. Upside gets you extra cash back. Yes, extra cash back on everyday purchases like gas, groceries, takeout. Here's what you do. You download Upside for free. You claim an offer at one of the 100,000 plus locations. You pay like normal with your card. You verify the purchase, and just like that, money back. So say I need to get gas or I want takeout one night, I'll search for Upside offers first. And after I spend, money appears in my app that I can transfer right into my bank account. Oh, and by the way, Upside's frequent users earn an average of $254 back a year. So to start getting your cash back, click the link in the description or scan the QR code. Use promo code SIDEBAR to get an extra 25 cents bonus on every gallon on your first tank of gas. In July of 2023, 47-year-old Jennifer Cleveland was looking forward to a day at the spa. Mom of four, who worked for a local Texas radio station, posted on her Facebook page, quote, "The Lux Med Spa by Amber Johnson will definitely make you look and feel beautiful." But just one day later, Jennifer would be dead. This is after she lost consciousness inside that spa and was pronounced dead at the hospital. And since then, multiple investigations have been launched, and there is even a new law on the Texas books named for Jennifer in an effort to make med spas in the state hopefully safer. We're going to talk about that. Now, we know that the business's owner, Amber Johnson, and the spa's medical director, Dr. Michael Gallagher, are facing a combined 39 charges. This is according to newly filed indictments. They both turned themselves in to Freestone County, Texas authorities this week. They bonded out. This is per reporting from outlet KWTX. But how did we get here? Right? What happened
How did we get
to
here?
Jennifer inside that med spa? And why are two different people facing such serious charges, criminal allegations? I want to get into it. There's also a civil component that we're going to get into too. Now, an attorney for Johnson, David E. Moore, confirmed to KWTX that Jennifer did go to Lux Med Spa on July 10th, where Johnson started an IV treatment for her. Moore told the news outlet that Jennifer had signed consent forms indicating she wasn't on any medications, didn't have any chronic medical conditions, and wasn't under the care of a physician at the time. Around 20 minutes later, after her treatment started, according to Moore, Jennifer told Johnson she didn't feel well. So Johnson allegedly had her sit up, take deep breaths, but Jennifer lost consciousness. Now, Moore says that Johnson started CPR on Jennifer, and that is when she allegedly found a vape pen in her bra. We're going to get more into why that's important or possibly important in a second. But Johnson was reportedly able to revive Jennifer momentarily. This is according to what Moore told KWTX, but then she went unresponsive. Johnson allegedly tried to call 911 twice from the phone at the spa's front counter, claimed the line was busy, went unanswered. I wonder if there's phone records to maybe establish those calls.
Now that
And she was
sounds
eventually
weird.
able to get through on her
That
personal
sounds
cell
weird,
phone. Again,
and it
this is
sounds
according to her
very
attorney.
suspect.
EMS rushed Jennifer to the hospital. The police told KWTX she died on the way. Now, outlet KCEN TV reported on Jennifer's autopsy report, which apparently stated that Jennifer, quote, received an IV infusion containing vitamin B complex, ascorbic acid, cyanobalamin, and TPN electrolytes. Now, cynomobalamin is a form of B12. It's meant to treat vitamin deficiency, but according to the Texas Medical Board, TPN electrolyte solution needs to be prescribed by a doctor and is, quote, known to cause complications due to the potassium chloride in it. Now, KWTX reports that Jennifer's final autopsy report listed her cause of death as, quote, sudden cardiac death of uncertain etiology. But the manner of death, which could be natural, accidental, suicide, homicide, was listed as unknown. So both of those are things that defense attorneys can work with. If there's something not definitive, does that leave room for reasonable doubt? The autopsy also reportedly stated the administration of intravenous therapy cannot be definitely ruled in or ruled out as contributory at this time. However,
Okay.
the IV bag was collected at the scene and the contents were tested.
Yeah, why you
TPN
got mess about
electrolytes
doing
were apparently present.
IVs?
It was also alleged that Jennifer had been getting weekly infusions but didn't specify exactly what kind of infusions or for how long. This is according to KWTX. Here's the counter argument, right? Johnson, the spa's owner, apparently or reportedly didn't have a medical license. The argument is wasn't supposed to be able to get or administer prescriptions. Officials allege she got around that by working with Dr. Michael Gallagher, a Texas anesthesiologist who was listed as the spa's medical director. And on the day that Jennifer died, according to her lawyer, Gallagher was actually more than 100 miles away in Frisco, Texas, but Johnson was allegedly able to get the drugs using Gallagher's credentials. And remember, I mentioned the vape that Johnson apparently found when she was trying to do CPR. So Attorney Moore told KWTX that he, quote, requested the vape pen concealed in Miss Cleveland's bra be tested for controlled substances. The final autopsy report indicated sudden cardiac arrest death of uncertain etiology, as well as the postmortem toxicology being significant for tramadol and trazodone, neither of which were administered by Amber Johnson. So the Texas Attorney General's office took over the case. They apparently presented it to a grand jury and got these indictments that were returned against both Johnson and Gallagher in Freestone County. According to the indictment paperwork, the grand jury charged Johnson with 14 counts: felony murder, second-degree manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, 9 counts of delivery of a dangerous drug, practicing medicine without a license, and tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. Gallagher faces even more counts, according to his indictment, but many of the charges kind of mirror Johnson's: felony murder, second-degree manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, 9 counts of delivery of a dangerous drug, practicing medicine without a license, practicing medicine in violation of Texas
Wait, he was
occupations
practicing
code,
medicine
and the
without a
court paperwork
license?
also seems to
Practicing medicine without a license. Why am I not surprised?
show the math totaling up how much bond that should be set for each defendant, because according to multiple reports, Johnson turned herself in, posted a $69,000 bond. Gallagher bonded out on jail on a bond of $96,500. I want to dig a little bit more into the specifics of these alleged criminal violations. I think it's important. We're going to explore it more with Aaliyah Roberts in a minute. But it says, quote, Amber Johnson, on or about the 10th day of July 2023, did then and there commit or attempt to commit a felony, namely practicing medicine without a license, causing physical harm to another person, or delivery of a dangerous drug, or committed or attempted to commit an act clearly dangerous to human life, namely administering TPN electrolytes to Jennifer Cleveland that caused the death of Jennifer Cleveland. Felony murder is a little different, right? It's not saying you intended to cause the death of Jennifer, but you committed a felony, you intended to commit a felony, and as a result, someone died. Now, the manslaughter and the criminally negligent homicide counts, they're worded very similarly. But again, you might be dealing with different kind of standards here: recklessness, negligence. Each of the delivery of a dangerous drug charges, they name a different medication that Johnson is accused of giving to Jennifer as part of this IV cocktail, noting that the various medications, quote, bears or is required to bear the legend RX only. And I want to highlight count 14, so the last count in Johnson's indictment, tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. Quote, the grand jury further presents that Amber Johnson, on or about the 7th day of May 2025, knowing that an investigation or official proceeding was pending or in progress, namely investigation into the death of Jennifer Cleveland, make or present or use a record or document, namely a record or document containing the following additional notes, and add on TPN electrolytes, 10 ml, and dated June 10th, 2023, with knowledge of its falsity and with intent to affect the course or outcome of the investigation or official proceeding. That's quite the allegation. Now, we looked up the case that was referenced here, Cleveland et al. Versus McKesson et al. So Jennifer's surviving family apparently sued McKesson Medical Surgical. So this is a company that helps distribute meds and supplies like TPN electrolytes. There are other named defendants here, Dr. Gallagher, the Lux Med Spa, Amber Johnson herself. And the plaintiff's original petition that was filed in January 2025 kind of gives us some more information about Lux Med Spa. Quote, per the petition, defendant Amber Johnson, upon information and belief, is a former teacher's aide who, in or around the spring of 2023, had the idea to open a medical spa, undeterred by her lack of medical education, medical training, licensure, or even by the fact that
She had no business running a med spa with no medical training. That is just stupidity and negligence if I ever heard it or saw it. Let's continue.
not be the majority owner of such establishments, Johnson secured a lease in Wortham, Texas. She formed the Lux Med Spa by Amber Johnson LLC on April 12, 2023, and held a grand opening the following month. By the way, these are just the allegations, but it continues. Under Texas law, a physician must be the majority owner of a medical spa, and the spa must be formed as a professional organization, such as a PA, Professional Association, PLLC, Professional Limited Liability Company, or PC, Professional Corporation. When Johnson formed the Lux Med Spa, it was formed as an LLC, Limited Liability Company, and she was identified as the sole owner. Now, the brief also provides more alleged information about Gallagher's
And
supposed
this
connection
followed
to the
the
business. Quote,
paperwork.
through a mutual friend, Johnson approached Dr. Michael Gallagher about serving as the medical director of the Lux Med Spa. Defendant Dr. Gallagher purportedly agreed to act as medical director, though he never signed the medical director agreement with the Lux Med Spa and worked and resided more than 100 miles from Wortham, Texas. Now, according to this complaint, Gallagher only visited the actual spa, that location, 3 times.
Scam, scam.
When defendant Amber Johnson opened the Lux Med Spa, she and Dr. Gallagher approached McKesson to establish an online portal.
Y'all were scamming, and now somebody's dead because of y'all scamming. Damn shame.
Through which Johnson, a person with no medical education or training, could order dangerous prescription medications to be shipped directly to the Lux Med Spa. Now, the next part of the complaint gets a little bit in the weeds, but it is important to understand the type of medication that Johnson was apparently dealing with, despite, again, the allegation that she had no medical experience. Quote, utilizing the McKesson ordering portal, defendant Amber Johnson ordered total parental nutrition electrolytes, TPN electrolytes, to be shipped directly to the Lux Med Spa. TPN electrolytes are intended to be infused with total parental nutrition supplements, also referred to as IV feeding, to provide nutrition to patients who cannot consume food and nutrition orally. In fact, the Pfizer package insert accompanying the TPN electrolytes distributed by McKesson instructed that TPN electrolytes must be diluted in TPN solution prior to administration. TPN electrolytes are not intended to be included in an IV cocktail. Quote, to ensure patient safety, IV feeding infusions, particularly when electrolytes are added, should be administered in a highly monitored inpatient setting where emergency resuscitation equipment and trained personnel are available. The Lux Med Spa was not a healthcare facility, did not employ trained healthcare providers, and did not have emergency resuscitation equipment. The petition continues, quote, Ms. Johnson's lawyer indicated that Jennifer lost consciousness, collapsed to the ground, and had no pulse. When the IV bag was later found, it was empty, reflecting that the electrolytes intended to be infused in TPN solution over 8 to 12 hours were infused by Amber Johnson into Jennifer Cleveland in less than 30 minutes.
Ooh.
And the lawsuit alleges that McKesson
That's
created a
overdose.
system that made it so easy to ship dangerous drugs, with one of the claims being death is a foreseeable consequence of shipping TPN electrolytes to a medical spa. Even the Texas Medical Board, which investigated Jennifer's death, concluded that TPN electrolytes have no known use or medical indication in a medical spa setting. So all the parties are being sued individually for negligence. The plaintiffs also filed a healthcare liability claim. The family is seeking $1 million or more in damages, quote, as a
Yes,
direct
they
and
should get
proximate
it.
result of the negligence of the Lux Med Spa. As mentioned herein, Jennifer Cleveland died, and the plaintiffs in their individual and representative capacities experienced and continue to experience the emotional loss of a wife and mother, her love, comfort, and society, and her financial support. McKesson, by the way, tried to have this lawsuit dismissed, but didn't work. A judge denied it. According to the court docket, the case is ongoing. It's set for a jury trial this fall. Getting back to the current criminal case, I mentioned that Dr. Gallagher's charges mirror Johnson's, but he's also facing charges for allegedly allowing Johnson to use his medical license. He's also accused of aiding and abetting her. For example, here's how count 19 reads, quote, the grand jury further presents that Michael Gallagher, on or about the 10th day of July 2023, did then and there practice medicine in violation of the Texas Occupations Code by directly or indirectly aiding or abetting the practice of medicine by a person, namely Amber Johnson, who is not licensed to practice medicine by the Texas Medical Board. And after Jennifer's death, the disciplinary panel of the Texas Medical Board ordered a temporary suspension of Gallagher's medical license, saying his actions posed a threat to the safety of the people of Texas. Now, his license was reinstated. There were strict conditions put in. According to the Texas Medical Board
How
website,
did
he's
it
not
get
allowed to
reinstated?
supervise and delegate, quote, prescriptive authority to people like physicians, assistants, or nurses, and he had to undergo monitoring and take part in a class on medical supervision. The spa, by the way, has since closed. I do want to let you know there is some good news that
It's
came out of this
closed.
tragedy.
Good.
I mean, it's hard to find something out of that, but Jennifer's Law went into effect in September 2025. It requires all IV treatments in the state, in Texas, to be administered by a licensed professional. The advocacy groups and lawmakers behind the bill hope that it will make IV therapy centers around the state safer. But look, Gallagher, Johnson, they could be facing decades in prison if they're found guilty on these charges. And I want to understand a little bit more about the criminal case, about the civil case, about how it might tie in together. Let's get into it. Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit more, and I want to bring on Aaliyah Roberts, who's a trial attorney that specializes in all these different kinds of lawsuits. I am curious, though. This is a different kind of case, right? I mean, do you see actions like this both from maybe from a civil point of view, but from a criminal point of view? Have you seen something like this?
Thanks for having me, Jesse. As you said, I've normally seen it in the civil litigation standpoint, but I've rarely seen it in the criminal standpoint. I was very interested to read the differences of the complaints. I'm also interested to see that they actually charged both the defendants with murder.
Felony
Interesting.
Felony
murder,
so
right.
So it's not like intentional, like they intended to kill Jennifer, but it's the idea of you intentionally were committing a felony, right? The idea of administering this when you weren't supposed to, and she died. Is that unusual to you?
I think under the circumstances it's not, and also as we know, sometimes the prosecution will want to send a message, right? And I think this is the best way to do it. This is criminal behavior. We can charge it under the criminal statute, under the Texas Penal Code. Therefore, we should prohibit other individuals who might be thinking about doing this behavior, who otherwise are engaging in this behavior. Put it down, stop what you're doing, and get out of Dodge, because you can be charged criminally.
What would a jury need to consider? What kind of evidence would need to be presented if you're talking felony murder or manslaughter or criminally negligent homicide?
Right. So, number one, we have to look at the intent, right? We have to look at the mens rea element. Of course, we don't have to argue intent under the manslaughter because we have the felony, right? We have the intent to practice medicine without a license, right? The intent to administer medication without being a licensed medical practitioner. So, at that point, all that the jury will need know is that these individuals are not doctors, they're not nurses, they're not LPNs, licensed nurse practitioners, they have no medical background other than they're estheticians, and there may be something in the spa realm. And once you have that felony aspect, once you have that aspect together, and someone passed away, right? As a result of this, there's a victim, and the victim is no longer alive. So I think providing that evidence that they do not have the medical background necessary, also showing with the behavior that they engaged in then caused the death of this individual, that is really what the jury will need to know.
And recklessness and negligence are a bit different, but if you're making the allegations that you were doing something you did not have the authority to do, that is quite dangerous. I think you might be able to fill those check marks.
For sure. I think it's a little different, right? Because obviously, like you said, recklessness and negligence are different. I think it was smart to charge for both. Because if you say, oh, there was no disregard, because if I'm, these individuals, I'm the defendant, I'm saying I've engaged in this therapy many times, no one's passed away. And I think they said that there was a vape on the individuals in her bra when they were giving her CPR. So they're going to try to say that, oh, well, the vaping had something to do with it. But at the end of the day, if I am the defense, I'm going to say I've done this therapy many, many times. And as a result, no one has ever passed away. So that's why they might get away with recklessness, but there's still negligence because despite the fact that you've done it many times, all it takes is one time. And as we see right now, there was a loss of life.
So yeah, basically, that vape pen is really interesting. And to be clear, right, they're innocent until proven guilty. There still needs to be a presentation of evidence here and how they're going to do it. I did think it was interesting, if I'm reading it correctly, maybe I'm not, but Jennifer died in 2023. This case, again, my understanding was presented to the grand jury January of 2026. Why the delay? Is that unusual? Is this because this is a complex case?
There could be a lot of reasons, right? I think it could be determining whether or not we are going to proceed criminally. Can definitely play a role in making sure that you have all the necessary evidence that you need to present to a grand jury. It could be something as simple as there were key pieces of evidence that were delayed and they wanted to make sure they had those pieces of evidence to put it towards the grand jury. It could have been something where there were, things behind the scenes from, the prosecution standpoint that they weren't sure, going back and forth to determining, should we just let this be a civil case or should there be criminal charges brought? It could have also been something as simple as the family advocating. Maybe the prosecution originally decided that they were not going to press criminal charges based off of the information they had at the time. And maybe as information continued to develop and they continued to receive more evidence, then they determined to proceed with charging criminally.
Jennifer reportedly signed a consent form. If that's the case, what does that do in terms of liability, both from a civil or criminal context?
From both contexts, the defendants are going to argue that she waived any rights that she had as a result of signing this specific waiver. That you waived your right to a lawsuit, you waived your right to any type of charges regarding a civil litigation. However, criminally, that waiver, even though I'm sure the defendants will offer it, that waiver doesn't mean anything. I signed a waiver not to sue you, but now I'm not alive. So even if I sign this form, I'm sure no one could agree that I'm signing away my rights to have some sort of a remedy as a result of dying as a result of this treatment.
Or also the argument, I consented to what the facts were presented to me at the time. If there was information that was allegedly concealed, that could be something that may be a way to get out of it. What is generally the line, though, between medical malpractice? We see a number of these cases before, right, where somebody goes in for some sort of procedure, something happens. If they survive, they're traumatized by it, they're injured by it, they can file a lawsuit. If they don't, even their surviving family members can file a medical malpractice, a wrongful death action, versus actual criminal action. What's that line? Who determines that?
So from a medical malpractice, number one is civilly, right? Medical malpractice is civil litigation. So when you're talking about medical malpractice, you're asking if the actions that were taken by whoever the medical professionals were fell below the standard of medical care. And what that means is, as practicing physicians, we have a duty to our patients. There are certain guidelines that must be adhered to at all times because medical professionals took an oath. So if the care that you're giving, also known as the actions that you are doing on this individual, result in and fall below the standard of care, which means that they're not, all doctors across the board would agree that had we had this same patient in these same circumstances, we would have not engaged in certain behavior. That's how we get into a malpractice standpoint. Now, when we're talking on the criminal aspect, we're saying that these individuals fell below the law, right? That the whole point of how I think this transports itself into criminal court is because these individuals were practicing medicine without having the proper licensing that they needed to practice medicine.
Without
so now
license.
The felony aspect is I'm practicing medicine without having the necessary credentials. And as a result of my behavior that I took, now someone has unfortunately lost their life. And that's how we get into the criminal aspect.
It seems a lot of the charges and a lot of the potential evidence are interwoven between Johnson and Gallagher. Do you see a situation where if there is going to be a finding of guilt, it's against both? Or do you see scenarios where one holds more liability, potentially more liability than the other? Tell me what you think if they might see different potential outcomes for these defendants.
Well, it depends on how the defendants, also set their case up, right? Assuming they both have individual lawyers, if they're going to play the pointing game, right? One will say, like, I think Gallagher is the supervisor. He'll say, well, I wasn't aware of the behavior that was being engaged. I didn't verify that information. I didn't know what was going on, right? Therefore, I shouldn't be liable because I didn't specifically engage in the behavior. But there could be another standpoint where they'll say that, well, I was supervised by Gallagher because Gallagher told me how to have all this, how to actually administer the information. He told me what was supposed to be done, and I looked to him for information. And also, there was a key piece when the notes were modified. I believe the notes in the chart were modified, and I don't know how it's to be determined who specifically made those modifications after the victim passed away. Miss Cleveland passed away. They went back in the chart and they started messing with the chart, the medical chart, after the fact. So depending on if it can be determined who was doing that, that might also tie both of the defendants in for them to both be held liable.
What's the interplay? What's the connection between the lawsuit and the criminal case? Because sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you have overlapping defendants, couldn't you pause the litigation while the criminal case makes its way? Or how does it work?
Absolutely, Jesse, you're correct. Usually criminal cases are tried first because as a result of a criminal case, the individual is, potentially has the loss of their life, right? As far as enjoyment, as far as going to jail. You no longer have rights. So because your rights and your liberty are at stake, normally the criminal cases go first, because civil cases have to do with money.
And also, you don't want to say anything that could jeopardize your rights in the criminal trial, right? I mean, because there's more avenues to compel your testimony in a civil case, and you don't want to say anything that can be used against you and violate your right against self-incrimination in a criminal case. So there's a chance that this is going to be... So in other words, we'll see the outcome of the criminal case before we see the civil case, and whatever happens in the criminal case doesn't necessarily dictate what would happen in the civil case. Different standards, right?
For sure. And that's what I was going to say, Jesse. We have two different standards here, right? We have, for criminal, we have beyond a reasonable doubt, and for civil, we have a preponderance of the evidence. So there's two different standards here. One is a lot lesser, which is why I'm almost 100% positive.
Turns out the government tracks a lot of data, and it's scattered all over.
Positive the criminal case will go forward first.
By the way, the idea, I mentioned this before, that the disciplinary panel of the Texas Medical Board, they temporarily suspended Gallagher's medical license. Then it was reinstated. They put these strict conditions on. Is that a fact that's going to be relevant for both the civil and criminal cases?
For sure. And at minimum, it'll... To the extent that it'll be used to show that this individual had issues with their license, right? That can be something so small that then we'll say, well, of course they had issues with their license because they weren't necessarily adhering to the standard of care. So that's an argument that can be made by the prosecution. I'm definitely looking at the timelines in which, because of course there has to be some sort of disciplinary action that is begun or starts before the actual decision is made. So if I'm the prosecution, I'm looking at what type of information did they have at the beginning to start the disciplinary action, and did it happen before my lawsuit? Did it happen during this lawsuit? Did it happen after the lawsuit? To determine the timeline and to say maybe this individual shouldn't have been practicing medicine long before Ms. Cleveland passed away.
By the way, just to finish this up, what do you make of Jennifer's law? So it went into effect September 2025, again, requires all IV treatments in the state, in Texas, to be administered by a licensed professional. I actually wonder if a lot of people look at this and say, that wasn't the case? That wasn't what was going on?
I'm one of those people, Jesse. I'd say the same thing. Well, why wasn't that always required? Especially when we have things like a lot of people hear med spas and they think that it's just heightened for like Botox or things like that. But even things like Botox, even things like IV therapy, things that seem very simple, this is still medicine, right? There's still a practice of medicine. There still has to be an individual who has a license to actually know how much of the medication to administer to not, unfortunately, cause someone to lose their life.
Leah Roberts gave us a lot to think about. Thank you so much for taking the time. Always appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on.
Thank you very much. Okay, that was the end of the first clip. I have another clip for y'all. This is an update on the David case. Let's get it.
What is potentially the strongest evidence right now against David, the 21-year-old man accused of murdering and dismembering 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez? Digital forensics, witnesses. I want to condense it, I want to explain it, and I also want to talk about what the defense may do. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, real quick. Look, I know we're all looking for ways to be smarter with our money in 2026, and most of us are earning next to nothing, just letting our money sit there in a regular savings account. But our sponsor, Chime, is built to actually reward your money. Why do I say that? With their Chime card, members can get 5% cash back in a category of their choice, like groceries, gas, bills, travel, dining out. How great. That grocery sound, right? And with Chime's high yield savings account, you can earn 3.75% APY. That's 9 times higher than national average rates. They even help you be strategic with your extra cash. Like their Roundups feature, it deposits spare change on purchases right into your savings. So right now you can get a $75 bonus through my link. Head on over to chime.com/sidebar or scan the QR code on screen and start growing your money today. So one of the things I wanted to focus on that we didn't really get an opportunity to do, I think, in our prior episodes, is to really understand how strong is the evidence against David. Kind of gives us a preview of what a preliminary hearing will look like, now scheduled for later in the month. Again, that's where the prosecution will present sufficient evidence to have the case move forward towards trial. That's what they're hoped to do. They'll have a challenge from the defense, or even what we could expect from a trial. And when I talk about the evidence, maybe what's the most compelling evidence, right? Because we spent an episode really diving into the disturbing allegations that came out, but now I want to put my legal cap on for a minute. I want to talk about the allegations, the alleged evidence, how strong it may or may not be. So we're talking about 21-year-old David Anthony Burke, goes by David, months after 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez was found dead, mutilated, reportedly in David's Tesla at a Hollywood tow yard. Prosecutors have charged him, the singer-songwriter, with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. He's entered a not guilty plea. It is important to remember that he's innocent until proven guilty. But let's talk about the potential evidence here. I want to start with the murder charge that's also connected to the mutilation charge. In fact, all the charges are very, very connected to one another, and the theory is connected to one another. So we go to the brief that was filed by the prosecution in anticipation of the preliminary hearing. It was first set for this week. It's now been delayed. But it says, quote, "Tellingly, defendant subsequently purchased tools to carry out his plot to dismember and dispose of the victim's body. On April 24th, 2025, remember they are saying that she was killed on April 23rd, 2025 at his house. On April 24th, 2025, defendant ordered a shovel from Home Depot that was delivered to his home from Postmates. On May 1st, 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered 2 chainsaws to his home. On May 5th, 2025, defendant ordered and Amazon subsequently delivered a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a blue inflatable pool to his home. He made these purchases under the fake name Victoria Mendez. On May 8th, 2025, defendant returned to the same area in Santa Barbara County, leaving his home at around 11:30 p.m. He returned to the area again on May 31st, 2025. This is an isolated site off SR 154 where the victim's identification was subsequently discovered in January 2026. Additionally, on July 7th, 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered a burn cage to his home under the same fake name as part of his plan to incinerate evidence. Moreover, defendant took horrifying measures to destroy and discard the victim's body. After placing her body into the blue inflatable pool to prevent her blood from spilling onto his garage floor, defendant used a chainsaw and perhaps other tools to cut off her limbs. Small blue plastic fragments were found embedded in the victim's remains, which were collected by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department. The fragments were analyzed by the LAPD's Forensic Science Division Trace Analysis Unit. An expert was able to match a physical fit match from the blue fragments to the blue inflatable pool purchased by defendant in May 2025. In order to distance himself from the victim, he amputated her left ring and pinky fingers because her ring finger contained a tattoo of his name. Her fingers have not been recovered. The defendant then placed her head and torso into the cadaver bag he purchased. He placed her limbs into a garbage bag, which he deposited into his front trunk, laying the cadaver bag on top. For several weeks or possibly months, defendant left the victim's body to decompose inside his Tesla. Okay, of course, there will be a battle of experts and questions of how the evidence was collected, what does it mean, how it was maintained, but potentially making the blue fragments match is huge. If you match the pool to him, you match the pool to Celeste, that's going to be critical. The alleged purchase history, this digital trail, some of the most potentially damning evidence out there. We have seen historically that has been hard for defense attorneys to argue away or explain away. You know, I saw this idea that perhaps, you know, maybe these materials were purchased for some sort of music video. That could be a tough sell, particularly you talk about the timing, right? The timing of when they say, authorities say Celeste was killed, unless there's going to be a dispute, not only about cause of death by the defense, but also time of death. Why would you allegedly purchase those things? And if the order and delivery records confirm this, that's huge for the prosecution's case. I mean, the list of potential evidence in this brief says, quote, DNA evidence developed from blood stains collected from defendant's garage which match the victim's genetic profile. Proof of defendant's Amazon purchases and deliveries to his residence, including 2 chainsaws, a body bag, an inflatable pool, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a burn cage after April 24th, 2025. Again, the records, maybe even have the delivery person testify. Private investigator Steve Fisher, who's been on this case from the very beginning, shared photos of some of those alleged packages. You can see the deliveries are addressed to Victoria Mendez, or appear to be. It's unclear why David would use that particular name. But, quote, proof of defendant's purchase and delivery from Postmates of a shovel from Home Depot to his home on April 24th, 2025. It's not just one item, right? It's a collection of these very specific items. That is, again, my opinion, not great for the defense. But again, we're still in the early stages of this. Uber records showing defendant's transaction where he ordered an Uber to pick up the victim from her Lake Elsinore home and transport her to his residence the night of April 23rd, 2025. And when LAPD served a search warrant at the home that David was renting or staying at after Celeste was identified, they reportedly found all sorts of evidence in the garage to support this claim, this argument of dismemberment, including biological evidence that tested positive for blood. They say they were able, again, to match the evidence to the victim's unique genetic profile. I mentioned that before. Talking about the pool again, this reportedly had multiple linear cuts. And on top of all that, according to the prosecution's brief, surveillance video and other evidence confirmed defendant was the last person to drive the vehicle on July 29th, 2025, before he left Los Angeles on a concert tour. And remember, her body was discovered about a little over a month later. And the filing states that David lied to friends, business associates, and others about the strong smell of decay in and around the home and the car. So it could be very difficult for defense attorneys to say, you know, he was completely in the dark, he's being framed, he had no idea what was happening, what was going on. Although, is it possible someone else maybe had access to the car afterwards? Possibly, but does that negate his alleged knowledge of what was going on? So there's the idea of who may be a cooperating witness as well, right? What did they observe about the car? What did they smell? What did they ask David? So this all makes me wonder in terms of a defense. I wonder if defense attorneys could get to the point and say, look, yeah, he bought all this stuff. Yep, we're going to acknowledge that. He purchased all this stuff after prosecutors claim she died. They might not say she was killed, that she died. So maybe they may make the argument he wasn't responsible for her death. Maybe she died in another way, and then in a panic, he was just part of the disposal, or he helped with the disposal. I don't know if they're going to say perhaps someone else is responsible for her death. I mean, I've seen cases like this before. Out in Florida, the James Scandarito case, found not guilty of murdering his father, but guilty in connection with the dismemberment. Took the stand, told this really wild story, but the jury believed it. So in other words, will we ever really know what happened to Celeste or not? Because according to the autopsy report that was released, Celeste's official cause of death was multiple penetrating injuries. The manner of death was homicide. But perhaps defense attorneys will argue against that. Battle of the experts, say her body was too decomposed to really know what happened, to really know how she died. And then we get to this. So investigators contend that April 23rd was when Celeste was allegedly killed by David, soon after arriving at the house in the Hollywood Hills. How do they know that? How do they establish that time frame? From the court filing by the prosecution, it says, quote, at approximately 8:40 p.m. on April 23rd, 2025, defendant sent an Uber to transport the victim from her Lake Elsinore home to his residence. Again, the digital records will be key here. You don't always have that in other cases. They communicated before and during her Uber ride, which dropped her off at defendant's Hollywood Hills home around 10:10 p.m. Okay, so again, the digital records, the text messages, the potential testimony of this driver. At approximately 10:30 p.m., defendant sent text messages to the victim inquiring where she was. So it might be hard for the defense to say that message wasn't sent the time frame. So you're looking at this 20 minutes. What happened? Prosecution says the people contend this was part of defendant's premeditated plan to cover up the murder, as she was already dead by this time. It's a good point, right? I mean, like, why would he text her or allegedly text her if she was at the house? I mean, is this house so big he didn't know where she was? I don't know. Or does it go to this narrative that, you know, he's trying to cover up the tracks and trying to say something happened to her? Quote, knowing he had to silence the victim before she ruined his music career, as she had threatened very soon after her arrival at his home, defendant stabbed the victim to death multiple times and stood by while she bled out. Now, I will tell you, I don't know
And
what
wash your
evidence they have
blood
to
out.
definitively
I'll be
establish
right
what
back,
happened
y'all.
behind closed doors. This is their narrative. This is their theory. And by the way, I will get into a little bit more about the special circumstances allegations, that this is not just a murder, according to prosecutors, but a very specific kind of murder, the motive behind it. Quote, at no time did he call law enforcement or 911 or take her to an emergency room to attempt to save her life. And that's important because they'll say that this wasn't a case like, you know, they got into a fight, she attacked him, he panicked, you know, killed her as a result of self-defense, called 911. They're ruling that out. Quote, despite knowing she was dead and her family was trying to find her, the evidence will show defendant lied and claimed he didn't know where she was. In fact, defendant drove to Santa Barbara County immediately after the victim died, attempting to dispose of her property and destroy evidence at approximately 11:30 p.m. on April 23rd, 2025. He drove away from his home as he texted and called the victim's phone, asking where she was. Again, these were acts calculated and planned to set up his defense within a very short timeline after the victim's vicious murder. Defendant drove his Tesla north on the 101 freeway to San Marcos Pass Road, SR 154, near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. Now I'm wondering if there are potentially cameras capturing this movement. He returned home early the following morning on April 24th, 2025, before going to a radio interview for the release of his album that week. He sent 2 additional texts to the victim's phone that day, which obviously went unanswered because she was already dead. I'm going to talk about interviews in a little bit, by the way. After April 26, 2025, defendant never attempted to contact her again. That's important. That's important. If the phone records establish he didn't text her or call her and he's completely innocent, that would be surprising, right? Somebody, at the very least, you know, that he knows, has a connection with. She disappears, he's not going to try to contact her. Again, this is the prosecution's narrative. We'll see what the defense says. But another piece of evidence. Quote, defendant's cellular activity and communications derived from defendant's iPhone and Tesla, which demonstrate defendant's activities from April 22nd, 2025 through April 24th, 2025, including a trip to Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night after the victim arrived at his Hollywood Hills home. Evidence. Evidence. So that's the key here, that why prosecutors are going with lying in wait, silencing a witness, the special circumstances allegations to enhance the potential penalties for the murder charge, that David planned this, that it wasn't like they were arguing and something happened or she had an overdose and he panicked. They're making the argument that this was planned, this was premeditated, that he allegedly wanted her dead to keep her quiet about their alleged secret relationship, that she was a minor, prevent her from exposing this, ruining his career. Now things like the cell phone records, the rideshare records, the digital data will be crucial, which is why it's not surprising when Steve Fisher, the PI, says there are over 50 search warrants in this case. That's the kind of evidence in 2026 that tells so much of the story and can be very difficult for a defense attorney to refute. Placing time, location. Now, on the other hand, I don't believe authorities have the alleged murder weapon. I don't believe there's an eyewitness to this alleged attack. I don't believe there's surveillance footage showing this alleged attack as far as we know. So is that room for reasonable doubt? And one way prosecutors are going to tell this story and try to prove those special circumstances allegations surrounding the alleged murder will also be evidence of the alleged illegal sexual relationship, sexual relations with a minor. Digital plus timing. What do I mean? From the evidence list, again in the brief, it says the description of photographs depicting the victim naked, as well as while she was engaged with defendant in sexual activity when she was 13. As this evidence constitutes child sexual abuse material, the photographs themselves will not be presented. While all possible charges that could be proven were not filed, the CSAM is proof of their ongoing sexual relationship while the victim was 13 and 14 years old. So if this material is on his devices, again, quote, numerous text messages between defendant and the victim evidencing their sexual relationship, pregnancy, abortion, and use of Plan B emergency contraception. Messages through March 2025 prove defendant continued to manipulate the victim as she messaged, all we do is have sex and just hang out. Man, I want more than that for myself. These messages were obtained from defendant's iCloud data. So again, the digital data could help prove the sex charge. And we reported this yesterday on Sidebar, but the death certificate has been updated. This is per reporting from TMZ to suggest that it is unknown if Celeste was pregnant, even though there was nothing in the actual autopsy report, as far as we could tell, to suggest that she was. So it is a little confusing here. I spoke to Joseph Scott Morgan on my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, last night. He said they may have to just do that because of the investigative findings of the messages about pregnancy and, Plan B and abortion, and because Celeste was dismembered and decomposed. It can ultimately be difficult to 100% rule out that she was pregnant. So it's not necessarily saying that she was, but how do we know for sure? It's unknown. Although I will say, if prosecutors believe for sure that Celeste was pregnant or had evidence to establish that she was pregnant, they would have mentioned that, right? That would have gone to motive. That would have gone to the special circumstances allegations. Taking their narrative that David killed her to keep her quiet about the relationship being exposed, what's better proof of this alleged sexual relationship with a minor if they could show she was pregnant with his baby, right? They would have presented that. They didn't. So I don't know how much that's going to be a factor or not, but at the very least, digital evidence allegedly establishing the relationship and the narrative. Oh, and by the way, this came out yesterday. I think this might be evidence because of what I just mentioned before. It wasn't made specifically about the prosecution's filings, but I do wonder if this is going to be part of the case, because according to reporting from the New York Post, April 24th, so the day after he allegedly murdered Celeste, he does an interview on the Zach Sang show, and he was reportedly very casual, smiling, making jokes, but allegedly said this, quote, like in the process of, getting outside my house and exploring the world and finding friends, losing friends, finding relationships, losing relationships, it's just everything has kind of been shaping and leading up to this project in such a domino effect way. And when it came to writing songs about failed relationships, he said, I'm always expecting it to happen, and then after, as soon as it happens, I'm writing about it. And the host asked, but you saying expecting it to end in a devastating, tragic, sad way so it can inspire art, but are you manifesting that in a certain way? David responded, I don't know. I hope I'm not. I really hope I'm not, because it feels that way. So I hope I'm not involuntarily doing that, but it might be that way. And by the way, we may also get a glimpse of what else this trial will include. I say that because evidence from a prior investigation into David and Celeste may be a part of this trial, because the filing from prosecutors claims that LAPD robbery homicide detectives determined Celeste and David met in January of 2022 when she was just 11 years old, and allegedly began that sexual relationship with Celeste when she was just 13 and David was 18. And the court paperwork revealed that investigators have been looking into David for quite some time. The filing says detectives learned the victim had been reported missing to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department by her family who live in Lake Elsinore in February and April 2024. RCSD telephonically contacted defendant on February 17, 2024 after they identified a phone number in the victim's phone records that belonged to him. During the call, defendant claimed he had spoken to the victim last on February 13th or 14th, 2024, but stated he was unaware she was a minor or that she had been reported missing. RCSD advised him that Los Angeles Sheriff's Department deputies would be coming to his home. On that day, defendant was living at 804 North Doheny Place in West Hollywood. RCSD requested that LASD conduct a welfare check at defendant's home. LASD deputies went to defendant's home that night at 8:15 p.m. and informed him the victim was a 13-year-old runaway. Defendant again claimed he was unaware she was a minor and he had only met the victim once in person in November of 2023. However, defendant showed deputies a yearbook photo of the victim he had on his cell phone. Although he claimed to be unaware of where the victim was at the time, she returned home 2 days later. Despite being informed by law enforcement the victim was only 13, defendant continued to pursue her. After the victim returned home in February 2024, her parents took her cell phone away. Defendant drove to Lake Elsinore and paid a junior high school student in the victim's class $1,000 to give the victim a cell phone defendant purchased so they could stay in contact. Throughout 2024, the victim spent a significant amount of time with defendant, including summer weekends at his home in the Hollywood Hills and traveling with him to Las Vegas, London, and Texas to meet his family. And I mentioned timing. So when Celeste reportedly died, so two-part this evidence of this alleged relationship, which again goes into the sex crime charge, which goes into the special circumstances allegations, but timing. When Celeste reportedly died, yes, David was at the height of his career. Per prosecutors, April 23rd, 2025 is the likely date of the victim's death and when all her cellular activity ceased. The night prior, April 22nd, 2025, defendant and the victim engaged in a lengthy argument described in detail in their text messages. The messages revealed the victim's jealousy over defendant's relationships with other women as defendant led her to believe they had a future together. She became extremely upset and threatened to disclose damaging information about her relationship with defendant to end his career and destroy his life. We don't know those exact messages, but taking the prosecution's narrative, defendant's first studio album was due to be released on April 25, 2025. He had an emerging multi-million-dollar career already in progress. He also had multiple product endorsements, which were highly profitable. So yes, when Celeste died, there was the tour, sponsorships, interviews, album release. He allegedly had a party on April 24th, the day after Celeste reportedly died. So prosecutors will definitely try to establish how he was flying high and couldn't let anything jeopardize that she was going to come out, expose him, and killed her as a witness. We told you in an episode yesterday that after David was arrested, the video game Fortnite announced it was going to refund players who made David-related purchases in his game. His label ultimately dropped him. So I wonder if that's going to be the evidence the prosecutors will use to say, look what happened. This was what he was trying to avoid. Quote, proof of defendant's lucrative career as a singer and songwriter prior to April 23rd, 2025. Defendant had an album release party on the night of April 24th, 2025, before embarking on an international tour in late July 2025. Text message exchanges between defendant and the victim on April 22nd and April 23rd, 2025, where the victim threatened to expose defendant and destroy his career. Again, all important, potential, compelling evidence. Gotta call this one out too. It was reported that David's brother, Caleb, posted on Instagram, and this was reported by the account, the Shade Room, all pedophiles and rapists should die, ending with period. Now, this is an expired story, not entirely clear what this alleged post was about. Didn't mention David, but considering there was these reports about an effort by prosecutors to have David's family be subpoenaed and have to provide testimony in this case, interesting, to say the least. Now, this is the beginning stages. I am very excited at this preliminary hearing, again, scheduled for the end of the month. That's where we'll learn more about the specifics of the evidence, maybe about cooperating witnesses, but this is kind of a sample of what prosecutors claim they have against David. We'll see where it goes. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much.
Okay, and that's the end of that. We're going to go into another clip. One second. go into another clip. This is the update on the USF students.
A tragic update in the case of two missing University of South Florida students.
Today I'm able to confidently stand in front of you and tell all of you that we have located Nashida Bristy. We have contacted her family.
Now the sheriff is giving us an inside look into the investigation and the horrifying details they've uncovered so far.
This morning I'll be sharing information that needs to come with a strong warning. The details of this investigation are gruesome, and the actions of the suspect are nothing short of pure evil.
And what happens next as one of the victim's roommates sits in a jail cell charged with murder? I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. There's a case out of Florida that is unbelievable. It's really shocking and devastating. Two PhD students from another country, they came to South Florida to study for school. 27-year-old Zamil Lamone and his girlfriend, Nahida Bristy, were studying at the University of South Florida. They were both from Bangladesh. Nahida was working on a PhD in chemical engineering, and Zamil was studying environmental policy and engineering. Sadly, we now know that both Zamil and Nahida are the victims of homicide, and someone they trusted is accused of murdering them. His name, Hisham Abu Garbia. He was a former USF student and Zamil's roommate, and he was the last person known to be with Zamil and Nahida before they disappeared. Now we're learning new details from the Hillsborough County Sheriff, who addressed the public on Friday, including how Nahida Bristy's body was found and what questions still remain as the community tries to wrap their heads around this unbelievable tragedy. We're going to get into those details here shortly, but let's give you a little bit of background onto how this all started. The case began on April 17th when the University of South Florida Police Department was notified that 27-year-old Nahida Bristy was missing. Her disappearance was described as very unusual since she was known as a very responsible person who never missed important events. The following day, April 18th, a friend of 27-year-old Zamil Lamone contacted police because he was not answering any phone calls, which was also out of the norm for a person who was also considered very responsible. Investigators later learned the two students, who were both from Bangladesh, as I mentioned, knew each other, and that ignited a collaborative effort to find them. Here's what Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Cronister said happened next.
So our detectives believe that the first stop should be back at our second victim's residence. So we go to Zamil's residence where he lives with two roommates. One roommate continues to be elusive. The stories are inconsistent. Almost to the point where he will talk about anything, loves to talk about himself, and this continues and carries throughout the entire investigation, except when we want to talk about either one of our two victims. Then he immediately starts becoming elusive and deceptive. The other roommate, we learn very quickly that he wasn't involved, begins to become extremely cooperative, and at that point, he, at the initial stages, when this is still a missing persons case, notifies us that something's wrong.
As police look around the residence shared by Zamil, Hisham, and another roommate, there's a few things that really stand out, and this is where the investigation starts to take a different turn.
The doormat by the door's missing. There's some pots and pans missing. So our detectives, as hard charging as they are, their first stop is the dumpster. They learned that the trash compactor in the complex hasn't been emptied yet in these couple days. This is where we get the first break in our case. We go out there dumpster diving. These detectives getting inside of the dumpster and empty the entire contents. and they find Zamil's glasses, his student ID, his wallet, and his clothes, which are extremely bloodied at the time. Again, this is where we get our first break. This is where, during this timeline, this missing persons becomes a missing person endangered case.
During the initial search, there were theories floating around that Zamil and Nahida were married and they ran away together. But after detectives found Zamil's belongings, they realized that those theories were far from the truth, and investigators were now in a crucial, critical race against time to find the couple.
At the time, we believe that our now suspect was at just a point of interest. We needed more information. So we have enough evidence to get a search warrant. We go back to the residence and we serve the search warrant. And the search warrant's for the residence, for the roommates, both roommates' phones, for their person, and for their cars. They go into the residence, and we have some amazing technology, one of it being Blue Star that identifies the presence of blood. And when they deploy Blue Star, they can see in the kitchen area there's a large pool of blood. They see that the blood continues down the hallway and into our suspect's bedroom. The technology is so precise and finite that we can see the outline of a human being on the floor next to our suspect's bed, where he was curled up in a fetal position.
Create a website that looks like you know what you're doing, even if you don't know what you're doing, because you're using a website that developed a tool that knows exactly what it's doing.
He was curled up in a fetal position.
Now, this is where police start to take a really good look at Zamil's roommate, Hisham Abu Garabia, who, according to the sheriff, was elusive and deceptive from the beginning. And now there's a blood trail from the kitchen to his bedroom. What else they find is shocking.
We then examine his phone. His entire history had been wiped clean. No text messages, no emails, no GPS data. His search history totally cleared. So it takes us a little bit of time at that point because we have to do a forensic deep dive onto the phone. And what we found by doing a forensic deep dive is where we found a lot of disturbing searches. He searches for, can a knife penetrate a skull? Can a neighbor hear a gunshot? Can you bury a body in a trash bag and throw it in a dumpster? While he's conducting these searches, we also discover that he's making purchases. Purchases for large, heavy-duty black contractor bags, Lysol wipes, duct tape, lighter fluid, a lighter. As he's ordering some of the items from Amazon, some of them come from DoorDash. I want everyone in the room to think about this. These searches were conducted days before our two victims went missing. This was calculated. This is what makes this so premeditated.
A digital footprint allegedly pointing to a premeditated attack on these two students, but the evidence, according to police, doesn't stop with the online activity.
We then look at him. He's got a laceration to his left pinky, and on the back of his left tricep, he has a deep laceration where he should have been properly sutured. He should have went and got stitches. He was unable to explain where he got those, what we believe is defensive wounds. At that point, we turn to the car. In the trunk, very little blood.
Okay.
On the floorboard of the passenger side of his vehicle, again deploying Blue Star technology, we see a large amount of blood there. We later find out that that's Nishida's blood. That comes back to her. The GPS in the car, once again, wiped totally clean.
So now police say they have blood evidence belonging to both Zamil and Nahida. So the next question is, where are they? And what are the chances that they're even still alive?
While we're conducting this forensic deep dive on his phone to see where he had been days prior, we're able to determine that he had traveled over to Clearwater, the Sand Key area. We confirmed that by looking at a video surveillance from a nearby fire station that shows him get out of the car. He's around the Sand
Hey,
Key
smell
area.
the roses. How
Over
are
Clearwater, he
you?
spends a short amount of time there. Then as we're examining the longitude and latitude coordinates, we see he goes on the
Looks like you put on going live today on your new channel. Okay. Oh, you're editing? Alright.
Howard Franklin Bridge, and he stops there for a short amount of time. So at this point, we make the decision to launch a surge full of manpower and to go out and start an extensive search.
Despite police claiming the suspect's car GPS was wiped clean, his phone tracking data tipped investigators off to the Howard Franklin Bridge in Tampa, about 17 miles from the University of South Florida's campus, and that is
Okay.
where they make their first horrifying discovery.
As some of our detectives are examining the latitude and longitude of some of where he had been, they're traveling northbound on the Howard Franklin Bridge, on the Pinellas side of the bridge, and they see a large black trash bag sitting on the shoulder of the road all by itself. They stop. They walk up, and as they're approaching it, they immediately smell that unique smell of human remains when it's in that.
Now, apparently the guy who unalived these people do not realize that when a person is deceased, a deceased person releases off a gas. I can't remember the name of the gas, but if you try to quote unquote dump a body in the water, the gas that releases out of the body will make that body float. So apparently, this person did a little bit of homework, but not really that much. Let's get back into it.
Decomposition phase. They go up, they physically feel the outside of it, and realize that there's human remains there. They stop what they're doing, knowing that this could be evidence. We're in Pinellas County at this point, and they contact the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, who immediately responds, along with the Pinellas County Medical Examiner's Office, who takes custody of this bag and goes back. We learned during this that it is our victim, Zamil. We're able to determine that because he's in the early stages of decomposition. So we knew it was him through fingerprints that were obtained through the Department of Homeland Security when he had entered the country. When I talk about gruesome, he had been stabbed several times, which ultimately was the cause of his death. He was bound in front at his hands and at his ankles. His legs up towards his buttocks area was almost completely severed, so he could be bent together and make it easier to place in a trash bag.
Her mom, then you know just how expensive it is to feed a house full of kids. I mean, I need an entirely different budget category.
In a trash bag. He was left on the side of the road. As gruesome as this murder was, he was literally left on the side of the highway like a piece of trash.
The body
Dang, he didn't even
Zamil
make it in the
was
water.
discovered on April 24th, 6 days after he was reported missing. Remember, the suspect is not in custody at this point, but police get a disturbing tip, prompting them to respond to the suspect's family home.
We get a phone call from our suspect's family that the night before he had battered and committed domestic violence against them. He had been acting erratic. He got out of the shower with only a towel wrapped around him. He approaches his sister and begins to almost in like a humping fashion trying to grind on his sister, and at one point tries to kiss his sister. His sister has difficulty trying to push him away, and she is not able to freely leave that confrontation because he's able to overpower her. He batters the family at the same time. So we try to make contact with him. We know he's inside the residence. The family tells us, and we have him under constant surveillance. We know he's there. He refuses to answer the phone. He refuses to come out. We make the decision based on the violent nature that we know this individual is capable of. At the same time, we learn that a few days prior, he had purchased a firearm from a pawn shop. Now, later on, we determined that he never picked up that firearm, but we didn't know that. We didn't have that information at the time. Again, very dynamic, very fluid. So we activate our SWAT team and negotiators to try to bring this to a peaceful resolution. After several hours of trying to make contact, we're at the point where we made a determination we're going to go in and physically remove him from the house, place him under arrest. Right about that point, as you guys have seen the video and are watching the video now, he surrenders peacefully and he's placed under arrest without incident. At that time, we begin conferring with the state attorney who has been there since moment one, walking through this, and we're able to charge him with a bunch of charges that, at that point, later on, charge him ultimately with the two premeditated murders of our two victims.
Police now have the suspect in custody, but their investigation, it's far from over because Nahida Bristi, she's still missing. 2 days later, a crucial phone call comes in.
Two recreational kayakers are out again on the Pinellas County side. And while this is occurring, the deputies and Marine unit are doing a great job trying to determine the tide and when they're occurring and what the tide patterns are to see, hey, how far of a search pattern do we need? The divers are still in the water. As you guys were out there covering, it was a long several days as we were trying to locate our two victims, especially now knowing that we have one victim, the other one should still be in the nearby area. As one of our kayakers is fishing, his fishing line snags on a bag. He has to go further into the mangroves. He smells something as he describes as undescribable. And when he went and got closer to remove his fishing line, he sees that a plastic bag has been opened. There's been salt water in there. He can't tell what it is, but it looks like a human body. So he does the right thing and contacts law enforcement. We immediately relocate over there, contact the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office Marine Unit that's already out there with us, the Pinellas County Medical Examiner, Pinellas County Forensic Science Department, who came out and took custody.
While investigators are suspecting this is Nahida Bristi's body, there's a forensic roadblock that delays the identification, leaving the community on edge for nearly 5 days.
Unfortunately, because of the conditions that her body was left in, it was more in those advanced stages of decomposition, and we weren't able to just do a fingerprint. So that's what took longer. Today, I'm able to confidently stand in front of you and tell all of you that we have located Nahida Bristi. We have contacted her family. We are now actively working to release both bodies for religious reasons back to the families who live in Bangladesh. We were able to determine that this was Nahida. Unfortunately, couldn't do it because of fingerprints, but we did it because of DNA. We were able to confirm DNA, some dental work that she had done, and the clothing that she still had on from the video that we saw the April 16th when the University of South Florida Police Department narrowed down was the last time that she was observed on campus.
What does it mean to have confidence in legal AI? How about something that removes friction from everyday tasks like matter creation, whilst also providing advanced features like co-authoring and version history? Start building AI confidence. Watch the full video now.
Was observed on campus.
Officials now confirm that both Zamil Limon and Nahida Bristy's remains have been found, but according to the sheriff, the investigation is far from over. They need to find a possible motive. Why would this suspect take the lives of these two PhD students?
We believe and feel that they were together and that they were murdered in nearby proximity and around the same time frame. Yes, our suspects in custody, the victims are on their way being returned to their families, but there's a lot of investigation that still continues and has continued to this point. A lot of deep dive records, a lot of subpoenas that we're waiting for answers for that may result in additional charges forthcoming. You search for the truth. And second to that is you search for the why. I hope we find that out.
The suspect faces several charges, including 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder with a weapon, unlawfully holding or moving a dead human body in unapproved conditions, intent to conceal, tampering with evidence, false imprisonment, and battery, and he could face the death penalty if convicted. That is, if prosecutors decide to pursue the death penalty in this case. Another interesting piece of information from the sheriff, the 26-year-old defendant had a criminal record.
He does have a criminal history that we provided to you, a domestic against his brother, and at some point in a separate complex, he had entered an apartment that wasn't his, and when they caught him inside the apartment, he pushed one of the maintenance workers down, and that was a charge. It's criminal history.
The defendant is being held without bond in jail pending trial. According to a report by News Channel 8, the state attorney said he will likely face a grand jury by Thursday, May 7th. And we will keep an eye on this case for you. That's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Lee.
Okay. There was the update on the USF students. Prayers out to the family of those students. And one second, y'all. One second. Oh, crap. Hold on. Apparently, 50 Cent is, has a lawsuit for harassment. Let's get into it.
50 Cent sued. A former employee makes terrifying claims of threats and retaliation, and she says she has texts to prove it. Plus, I'll tell you what 50 Cent has to say about it. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Curtis Jackson, who you know better as 50 Cent, is a rapper, a producer, and a businessman. He's very successful. He's been around for a really long time, and he's loved by millions of people. But a woman named Monique Mayers paints 50 Cent as the boss from hell in a new lawsuit, and she makes a lot of allegations that include threats, FBI investigations, and the possibility that 50 Cent's associates were involved in the 2006 murder of Busta Rhymes' bodyguard. Mayers says she worked for 50 Cent for 12 years, and for part of that time, she did the work of 3 executives without complaint. But then in 2019, Mayers claims in a lawsuit just filed that things between her and 50 started to go south. In the lawsuit, Mayers' attorneys write, Jackson ran his workplace the same way he built his public persona, through fear, humiliation, loyalty tests, and punishment. Money bought power. Power demanded obedience. Anyone who refused became a target. Mayers claims in her suit that 50 Cent started asking her in 2019 to do things that were illegal. First, Mayers claims 50 wanted her to help him cover up bankruptcy fraud by helping his bodyguard buy his mother a house to hide money he had earned. The lawsuit states, on January 14th, 2019, Ms. Mayers texted Jackson directly, checked with the accountant, and you wouldn't be able to do anything for the house through the foundation. She then forwarded the accountant's advice to Walters and suggested Walters use the funds from the recent $168,000 wire as a down payment a lawful alternative to the scheme Jackson had proposed. Second, Mayers claims that 50 Cent and his associates wanted Mayers to file a false police report, claiming the rapper's bodyguard stole his car, but in reality, he believed the bodyguard had stolen $600,000 from him. That money, according to Mayers, had never been reported by 50 to the bankruptcy court as earned income. The lawsuit states, in a single day, Jackson had asked Ms. Mayers to file a false police report for a car that was not stolen, be an accomplice in concealing $600,000 in undisclosed cash from a state court, and fire Walters for the alleged theft, while Jackson listened from the shadows. In every instance, Jackson wanted someone else to stand between him and his illegal conduct or enable his feckless conduct. In every instance, Ms. Mayers refused. Because of all of this, including not firing the bodyguard, she says she was fired in late March of 2019, was promised severance but never received it. And she says that she was harassed and threatened by people associated with 50 Cent for years. The suit claims, after attacking Ms. Mayers' reputation, Jackson's intimidation campaign moved to her phone. From January 2020 through March 2026, Ms. Mayers documented more than 83 incidents of harassment involving at least 25 unique phone numbers from California, Texas, Georgia, New York, and in one instance, Tanzania. The suit includes texts like this one from 2023 that reads, "Who is this?" The sender responded, "I'm your friend 50. Are you still in San Diego?" Mayers responded, "You have the wrong number. Did he give you this number?" The sender responded, "Yeah, he did. Is this the wrong number?" "He said he would get me in tonight to watch him. Are you able to get in touch with him?" Mayers responded, "What's your name?" The sender responded, "Victor Sena." Mayers responded, "Where did you meet him so I refresh his memory?" The sender responded, "That was last night here in San Diego. It was very quickly because he was busy." Mayers responded, "No problem. Where exactly so I can remind him?" The sender responded, "At Park, San Diego." As time passed, Mayers claims in the suit that she was called to testify in front of a grand jury investigating allegations of fraud made by Jackson against a man named Mitchell Green at his company Sire Spirits. In 2024, Mayers said she received a text after receiving a subpoena to testify in a lawsuit against Sire Spirits. The text says Mayers texted, "Who is this?" The sender responded, "Ja Rule." Mayers responded, "Who are you trying to reach?" The sender responded, "Curtis." Mayers responded, "Who gave you this number?" Mayers said Ja Rule had never ever called her, not even once, and 50 Cent and Ja Rule had been in a public feud for decades. And the night before her deposition in the Sire Spirits civil case, Mayers said she received this text that said, "You will suffer, Fifth," a name used by 50 Cent. During the deposition, Mayers' suit claims that one of 50 Cent's lawyers questioned her about the unsolved 2006 murder of Busta Rhymes' security guard, Israel Ramirez, at a video shoot in Brooklyn. Mayers' suit claims the incident involved G-Unit affiliates, including 50 Cent. Mayers said she didn't work for Jackson then, and after the deposition, she received a threatening voicemail. The suit states, the campaign did not stop. On August 3rd, 2024, beginning before dawn, Ms. Mayers received 15 calls in roughly 3 hours, including voicemails stating, "Bang, bang, I shot you down." Exactly 1 year later, she received 15 more calls, same date, same count, same pre-dawn timing. When Ms. Mayers reported the conduct in court, Judge Melissa Crane stated, "I mean, this has never happened in any case I've ever had." In the end, Mayers says she has suffered lost wages and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She's asking for damages. But Curtis Jackson's lawyers say they will fight this lawsuit to the end. In a statement to Law and Crime, Jackson's lawyers wrote, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson and his representatives categorically and strenuously deny the baseless allegations made in a recent civil complaint filed by Monique Mayers, a former employee terminated for cause on or about March 27, 2019. To date, Mr. Jackson has not been formally served with any pleadings, nor have his representatives been contacted by opposing counsel regarding this matter. It is highly unusual that a lawsuit of this nature was apparently circulated to the press before it was seemingly filed, evidencing that these claims are entirely without merit and are nothing more than a stunt to garner media attention and damage Mr. Jackson's reputation. Ms. Mayers is a disgruntled former employee who was terminated for cause over 5 years ago. This lawsuit is nothing more than a transparent attempt to use the guise of a legal proceeding to seek an unjustified payday well outside of the applicable statute of limitations. Tellingly, Ms. Mayers has chosen to employ counsel who is currently engaged in separate ongoing litigation against Mr. Jackson on behalf of Shaniqua Tompkins. This connection further underscores the retaliatory and opportunistic nature of this filing. Furthermore, Mr. Jackson takes any and all threats to himself, his current and former employees, and any witnesses incredibly seriously. Contrary to the false narratives being peddled in this complaint, when these alleged threats were brought to light, Mr. Jackson's legal counsel actively encouraged Ms. Mayers to go to the authorities. Moreover, Mr. Jackson's counsel proactively reported these alleged threats to law enforcement as well to ensure they were thoroughly investigated. We look forward to vigorously defending against these false claims in a court of law and anticipate a swift dismissal of this frivolous lawsuit. Okay, so let's dig into this. I want to bring in Brian McMonigal. He's a criminal defense attorney, also has represented Bill Cosby and rapper Meek Mill. So, Brian, thanks for coming on. I want to get your thoughts first off about this lawsuit.
So thanks for having me. And first off, here we go again. You know, another celebrity filing. This one's a little different than some of the others we've seen recently, including Jay-Z's that was dealt with in his favor. I'm really confused by some of the legal problems the plaintiff has here. What jumps out at me as a trial lawyer is a statute of limitations problem with the lawsuit. You know, in all states, there are statutes of limitations. Georgia's no different. It's usually a couple years on a civil claim, and you're going to have charged conduct within the time period of that statute. And despite the fact that there's text messages here, et cetera, that are being referred to as threats, without connecting them specifically to the defendant, I don't know how plaintiff gets past a motion to dismiss based on a statute of limitations argument, but TBD.
Yeah, TBD is for sure. I think we have learned some interesting things here. If everything that she's claiming in this lawsuit is true, or at least some things, there have been apparently FBI investigations related to 50 Cent. She's saying, you know, she's been in touch with the FBI. She's been called in front of grand juries to testify. So it sounds like they've been investigating him over the years, but no charges have been filed.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. I mean, the good news for her is she's been a dutiful reporter or a complainer, if you will, of misconduct. But law enforcement apparently investigated this and found nothing. So, again, for the defense, you're in a much better position where you've had the complaint. It's been referenced to law enforcement, and they've said, "Hey, we don't see anything here." So it's kind of, you know, it's a mixed bag for the plaintiff, I think, in that they vetted it, they didn't find anything, and here we go with a lawsuit. Plus, this lawsuit seems to be tied to a different one. Same lawyer, same defendant, and so. Again, the defense in this case is really armed with a lot of ammunition here to defend this, I think.
I do find it interesting that she said these texts and everything, the text messages, and then later the voicemails, which she said were verified by a sheriff's detective, that they documented these. She said they went on for years, and she was scared, and they freaked her out, but then she never reported them. And you know, I would think that the FBI and the sheriff's office would have the tools to probably track this down, track down who owns the phones, unless they're burners, or who had control of the phones, things of that nature, especially if somebody's calling somebody in the middle of the night and saying, bang, bang, you know, you're dead or whatever. I mean, that seems pretty concerning after you have been in front of a judge for a deposition.
Yeah, I mean, you sound like juror number 4. I mean, that's the problem for the plaintiff in this case. There's just a void here in terms of reporting. And then why didn't you take steps to just avoid it completely with your phone, et cetera? So I I wonder whether the timing is just so problematic for the plaintiff where they really can't get anywhere, and maybe that's the reason that they, publicly flushed the lawsuit. Maybe as an attempt to get a quick settlement in the case. My guess is there won't be one. Although I will say this: what is problematic for the defense is that this is somebody that was in his inner circle, and that can't be denied. It's also someone who apparently was threatened. That can't be denied. They're not good facts for the defendant. But from a legal standpoint, plaintiffs got some real challenges ahead. Avoiding statutes of limitations, avoiding the questions that you've raised fairly, just in terms of why you wait.
She claims too, she was doing the job, she says, of 3 executives and didn't complain, didn't ask for additional compensation. She did the job of 3 executives for 3 years. And then during that time, she said basically there were 3 strikes in 2019 where she refused to cover up or do things that were illegal at the request of Curtis Jackson. And if that is actually true, is that problematic for Curtis Jackson? She's claiming that he wanted her to hide income from the bankruptcy court, do things like that. She wanted her to file a false police report, which she didn't end up doing. So I guess there was no crime committed there. But the bankruptcy court stuff, when you start talking about hiding money from the feds, they don't like that. So are these things that could be problematic for 50 Cent if those things are indeed true?
The allegations are problematic. She's accused him of mail fraud. She's accused him of any number of crimes. The problem, again, is apparently the FBI has investigated these allegations, and they haven't gone anywhere, and there haven't been any criminal charges. And now we're at an hour where criminal charges aren't going to be brought, and civil charges may be barred because of the statute of limitations. So everything she accuses him of is disparaging. A couple of crimes in there she's accused him of. Problem is the people that bring indictments, convene grand juries, and bring criminal charges haven't quite seen it that way. That's her problem. But yeah, salacious allegations, where if you got to a jury, if you could get to a jury, could be a real headache for the defense. I think there's just too difficult a road to get to that jury.
There's also an inference in here. She's claiming that during this deposition in 2024, that Curtis Jackson's lawyers brought up the murder of a rapper at Busta Rhymes' studio, and that it was totally out of bounds. This had nothing to do with her. She said she didn't work for Curtis Jackson at that time. So that this was brought up to intimidate her. This is her claim. That murder remains unsolved. So she's saying members of his crew, the G Unit crew, were apparently around when that homicide was committed. That she's almost implying that his people have knowledge of this murder, and she's saying that there's a retired NYPD detective who has basically said that high-profile rappers were involved in this homicide or had knowledge of it. So that's a pretty bold claim as well.
There's no question about it. When I read that piece of it, I had to read it 2 or 3 times over because I quite frankly didn't get it. Why would his lawyers be questioning her in a deposition about that subject? Made no sense to me. And
it makes no sense.
Obviously, there's got to be more to it. But again, it just sounds like a lot of this is let's throw as much mud against the wall as we can, see what sticks, if anything. And that would be one of the pieces to it. Again, that murder investigation will always be open. And so maybe it's just a little veiled threat to say, hey, listen, I know more than maybe you want me to know. Listen, I'm all ears on this one. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when we get into a courtroom, when there's an answer filed, and a judge gets control of this thing, and then the motions start flying in terms of statutes of limitations, motions to dismiss for lack of a proper complaint. It took me, 15 to 20 minutes to figure out what they were actually claiming, the civil violation is. So again, it's not surprising when you think about who's involved here. We've seen a lot of lawsuits over the past probably 3 or 4 years of like nature where celebrities are being sued for one reason or another. Many of them have not gone well for the plaintiff.
And I should say that it was the unsolved murder of Israel Ramirez
Yes.
in 2006. And it was at the Busta Rhymes video shoot in Brooklyn. And it was involving an incident, according to her, of G-Unit affiliates, including 50 Cent. So that's a pretty bold claim. And you're right. I think that this is a 67-page lawsuit. I mean, 67 pages. And there's a lot in there. And she is basically saying, like, she's been intimidated, she's been harassed, she's had anxiety, she's had all these issues. But in between, there's all this stuff. And it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it reads, it reads a magazine you'd find in a grocery store. And that's never a particularly good thing for a civil complaint either. Judges are going to look at these complaints and they're going to say, well, listen, once we put aside all the vitriol and all of the, salacious details, for lack of a better description, where's the rubber going to meet the road? Where is the meat of this civil case? How do you avoid the filing at this late period of time? What's your answer for how it comes within the statute of limitations? And then if you get past summary judgment after all of that, then it becomes interesting. Then it becomes fun. Then we're all tuned in for a jury trial. The challenge will be to get there.
If I am 50 Cent, though, and I'm reading all of this, and the FBI's actually been investigating me, and my name's coming up in this unsolved homicide investigation, and the feds are talking to people about things my lawyers don't even know about, I think I'm a little worried.
Yeah, I'm guessing he knew, and that worry already happened, if he had worries. Anybody... at least from a distance, and it's always been a distance for me, he doesn't seem like a guy who does a lot of worrying. He's had the kind of life that obviously makes it possible for him to sleep okay, despite all of the investigations that have gone on in this case. It may well be that he's done absolutely nothing wrong.
Right.
At a minimum, obviously, it can't be fun for him to have his business in the street. Particularly from someone who was so close to him and who was really overseeing just about everything in his professional life. That's what's interesting about this lawsuit. Some of the other ones we've seen, it's not that case. It's someone who's in a relationship with someone. It's someone who's briefly known the celebrity. Here, it's someone who's kind of been the keeper of the keys for a while. I just wonder if she waited too long. If there's any legitimacy to any of her allegations, whether she waited too long to make them.
Well, she said she was supposed to get severance and never got it. So that's one of the claims in here. And I'm thinking to myself, too, why didn't you file something back then and say, I was due severance, give me my severance,
Too little, too late in a lot of ways, I will tell you. And it makes you wonder why the filing now. Does the filing now have something to do with they're trying to piggyback on another lawsuit that was claimed by the defense? And I think there'll be more claims along those lines as we move forward, once they've had a time to digest it and start figuring out their defense strategies.
Well, and that's his lawyer's claim. But they're claiming, look, she's endured years of threats. They basically say they have a paper trail with the FBI and this sheriff's office investigation, but as you're saying, there's still a statute of limitations.
There's no question about it.
In your opinion, yes.
Yeah, there's no question about it. They're going to have to find conduct that he engaged in, or that others engaged in at his direction, and prove that within a 2-year time period. It could be the last thing. It could be something very late in the game, and that will trigger the statute. But if they don't find it, they're going to be SOL here on this lawsuit. So it's one of the first times I've ever seen an immediate response by the defense of, hey, listen, you blew the statute. Because that was one of the first things that his lawyers referenced. And it was the first thing that came to mind as I read the lawsuit. Again, she's going to have to be able to establish that those threats that occurred, I think it was 2024, which was within the statute, were made by him. Were made by somebody that he directed. And I don't know they have that. If they have it, they didn't plead it in the lawsuit.
They didn't.
Well, we will keep an eye on it, and we will wait and see, as they say. Brian McMonagle, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay, and that's the end of that. We're gonna go to an update on the Duggar family. Let's get it.
Not only do we have updates regarding the criminal cases of Joseph Duggar and his wife Kendra, but also Joseph's brother Joshua too, as he's now looking at spending more time behind bars. But we got a chance to sit down with their cousin, Amy Duggar King. What are her thoughts, her feelings, her opinions on everything that has happened in the past few months? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So as you know, we have been following the criminal cases involving the Duggars, and a little bit later on, I'm bringing on Amy Duggar King to get her perspective on all this. But 31-year-old Joseph Duggar is facing charges in 2 different states. In Florida, the 19 kids and counting star has been charged with felony counts of lewd and lascivious molestation of a victim less than 12 years old, lewd and lascivious behavior conducted by a person 18 years or older for, this is again the allegations, allegedly sexually abusing a 9-year-old girl during a family vacation back in 2020. He was released from Florida jail after posting a $600,000 bond. But at the same time, he and his wife, 27-year-old Kendra, are also facing charges in Arkansas. Now, apparently, as part of this ongoing investigation, authorities there charged them with the misdemeanor crimes of 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a minor, 2nd degree, 4 counts of false imprisonment, 2nd degree. Not entirely clear what that all is related to, possibly something to do with their 4 kids, as per reporting. And by the way, I might have a better understanding of what this is in a second, but I will tell you, People magazine, for example, reported that a source close to the family told them, I can tell you the arrest was a result of a home inspection and the door locks being on the exterior of the doors. We can't confirm that 100%, but we know that she bonded out, she's been released. They have each pleaded not guilty to all of these charges, and they will reportedly make their first court appearance on these Arkansas charges August 10th. Now, we have a new piece of information. Kendra has been reunited with these kids, her kids, after the court dissolved a no contact order that had been put in place. According to People, though Joseph, by the way, is still not permitted to have unsupervised contact with his children given the charges in Florida, Travis Story, the lawyer for both Kendra and Joseph, argued in court paperwork that Kendra had been prohibited from seeing her children, her kids, since March 20th, argued, quote, the alleged victims have expressed a desire to have contact with Kendra. So by saying alleged victims, seemingly confirming, right, the kids are the ones these Arkansas charges are about, right? Goes on to say, quote, that Kendra has complied with all terms of the no contact order and has not committed any violations, and also made the argument that the continued enforcement of the no contact order is preventing evaluations by qualified third-party agencies that are necessary to resolution of the case and to ensure the ongoing safety and well-being of the protected parties. Does make me wonder if there's some sort of settlement that may be worked out here and this might not go to trial. Now, the district court agreed to dissolve the order, added that the Arkansas Department of Human Services will supervise, communicate, and facilitate reunification between Kendra and the children. And with that in mind, I actually had the opportunity real quick to interview Courtney Kleiman, who's an SVU and domestic violence prosecutor. Take a listen. Courtney, thanks so much for taking the time. This no contact order that kept Kendra from seeing her 4 kids, it was dissolved. Is that typical in cases like this? I mean, when you compare her charges with what her husband is facing out in a different jurisdiction, it's one thing, but is it typical to see
I
that?
won't let this right
I
here
would
be
say
the last
absolutely.
clip, by the way.
The charges that Kendra are facing are not direct sexual abuse of her children. So usually when cases like that happen and the other parent is charged, it's usually called something endangering the welfare of a child. And it's very, very hard to terminate parents' rights. And because the crimes were not abuse of her own children, the order of protection, that makes sense for it to be dissolved, but it could also be modified later in family court as well.
Let me just challenge that for a minute, since we don't know the exact circumstances or allegations that surround her charges. Let's say they are about her own children, but would that change the analysis? Could you say there could be a situation where even she's charged with respect to alleged activity, behavior with respect to her own children, and she could still have that no contact order be dissolved?
So I think every criminal case that starts with abuse of a child and it's a parent, there is a no contact order of protection in place that starts. However, that order of protection is almost always, depending on the jurisdiction, usually subject to family court modification. And so you can have a no contact order of protection in criminal court, but then you can go to family court and apply for a no offensive contact order of protection, which is a less restrictive order of protection, which allows you to have contact with the child. Or you get supervised visitation. You can have a third party be with you when you are seeing your child. It is very, very difficult to terminate a parental order of protection.
All right, before we go any further into this, I have to say this is a little bit of a 180, but I think a surefire way to ruin a great outfit is with a broken, worn-out belt, right? That's where Anson Belt and Buckle comes in. This is huge. This is a family-run company that has completely reinvented how belts should work since they launched it in 2009.
I don't know.
Instead of holes, Anson uses a micro-adjustable track system with quarter-inch to be released February 2nd, 2033. This is according to the Bureau of Prisons for reporting from People. So Josh's attorney, Bo Brindley, told the outlet, quote, "There is no way to know the basis of a deviation of this limited magnitude."
Niles Knurk. He's the owner of Gurney's. They're a seed company, and they've been selling exclusive varieties since 1866.
Way to know the basis of a deviation of this limited magnitude, adding that it could be the result of a program availability which is wholly out of the inmate's control. So not necessarily saying a violation of some kind, right? Or that he did something wrong. And this comes as Josh has been pushing forward with his fourth appeal of his conviction. In fact, recently the United States Supreme Court declined to hear an appeal of his in June of 2024. But now I go to his cousin, Amy Duggar King. Claims that he has been placed in solitary, has some thoughts on the extension of this prison sentence, has some thoughts on the situation developing with Kendra and Joseph. I got a chance to sit down with her and ask her all about it. Amy, good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it. I have to imagine this is an incredibly tough and confusing time for you and your family. So I just want to start there. How are you doing? How is your family doing throughout all this?
Yeah, I think it's like a nightmare that never ends. And so I am trying to do everything that I can in order to just help me have some mental clearness, and my mental health is really important to me. So I'm focused on, my son, my marriage, our life and our little family and my mom. And it's something that is really helping me through it. Honestly, I homeschool. I am very hands-on mom. He has lots of play dates, lots of stuff like that. And so I'm just trying to keep myself busy and not really focus on probably all the details that are to come.
Have a lot of people been reaching out to you, asking you questions? I mean, what's that been like?
I have had so many people reach out. I've had friends drop over flowers and and gift cards and just been so sweet. I just feel like there's such a loving community here. My friends are, my little inner circle that I have, and I just love them so much. And so, yeah, that's the people I vent to, the people that I share my inner thoughts to, and I know that they are just going to be there for me and just to help me through it. So I just have to lean on that.
There is so much that's always talked about with your family for years, and there's a lot being said right now. What do you think is the biggest misconception, the biggest misperception that people have right now, whether it's about you, whether it's about your family, the Duggar family in general? What is something that, if you have the platform, you could say everyone's getting something wrong? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I think it really stems down to the IBLP practices. I believe that's, what my family has believed for years and years, and they followed these teachings. And I do think that people think it's godly. People think that it's just, and so I honestly believe that the IBLP framework of just the belief system is so messed up. And so I think people want to believe what was shown on TV, but they don't want to believe the other half. Right? They want to believe what they've been shown all of these years. And so, there's going to be the supporters and the ones that actually see black and white and see for what it is.
Just to expand upon that, based on the allegations that Joseph and Kendra are facing, and these are allegations at this point, they haven't been found guilty in a court of law, very different charges that Kendra's facing than Joseph. I mean, they're facing similar ones in Arkansas. Do you think that potentially plays a role in what they're accused of doing?
I think it definitely plays a role. Allegedly, I hope it's not true. I hope all these charges there's no truth to them, but I do believe there's a reason why the kids were taken. I do believe that there's more to this story, and we're just now uncovering it, and it's going to take a while. Court dates are months apart, and so I just feel like we're all on pins and needles as we wait to hear more information and to find out the verdict. And there's just so much. It's ongoing. It is an ongoing investigation, and I hate that it is someone that I'm related to.
Have you spoken to them, or when was the last time you spoken to Joseph or Kendra?
No, I actually haven't spoken to them in quite a while. When Josh was arrested and went to prison, before his first scandal, the one involving his sisters and that huge scandal, I confronted him, and I really spoke truth about how I felt in that situation. And I wrote it in my memoir, Holy Disruptor. Just really told the whole story of that entire scene. I really painted it for people, to really understand what went on. And in that moment, I realized that in my opinion, the big house, my cousin's house, it was not a safe place for me to be, and I have not gone back. And that includes anyone that showed support for Josh. Unfortunately, in my opinion, those cousins and Joe and everyone else really did show their support for Josh during that time. And I had to make a very healthy boundary and say I cannot support anyone who is going to support this man. There has been a healthy boundary. I haven't actually spoken to them in probably 5 years.
Oh, wow. And what about anybody else from the family? Do you stay in touch with anybody else? Or?
So Jill and I are very close. Jill is someone that I really lean on, and she leans on me, and I watch her kids, and we have a really great cousinship. I think she's gotten a lot of clarity and a lot of therapy, and I think it's been really great for her to really see things for what they are. And yeah, we've been able to connect on different levels of just how we feel about certain things. But as far as anyone else is concerned, no, my boundaries are high, and they're put there for a reason.
You posted a job and got 100 applications. Half were bots, the other half used auto-apply. Here's what happens when you require video. Bots can't...
Boundaries are high, and they're put there for a reason.
What do you think about the fact that the court has now dissolved that no contact order, so Kendra can now have contact with her children again?
I really hope that the kids are just safe in every aspect. I don't believe you can cherry pick on how children are safe and how they're protected and how they're cared for. So I hope that they are being cared for at the highest level. I don't know what more to say. I don't know really what went on because we still don't know because of her court date and all the things we don't really know. I know that she has been compliant. I know that she's, I think she's in touch with them is what I'm sure that's happening. And I just wish them all the best. And I hope that Kendra, whatever she needs help with and whatever she needs therapy for, that she'll receive it.
Do you know if other members of the family are helping Joseph, Kendra, the kids during this time?
I know nothing. I have no information that's given to me, but I have heard through the grapevine that is the case.
What was your reaction when the news broke about those charges?
I think the first time that the charges were, what they were, I was absolutely brokenhearted. And the fact that now allegedly it could be Joe, I loved him. He's such a sweet, from what I knew, such a sweet person, someone that people really relied on, very funny, very friendly, big teddy bear, knew how to, he was just really humble and kind. And so the fact that this is Joe, it absolutely just breaks my heart. In a whole other way. Like I said, it's a nightmare that doesn't end. And I hope and pray there's not any more. But at the same time, I'm going to be real and be honest and tell you that there probably is.
Jumping on that for a second, did you look at this and say, a lot of people, when someone's charged with a crime, they go back, they look at their past with that person, and something that maybe they didn't see back in the day, maybe they ignored, now they look at it with a different light. Again, these are allegations, hasn't been proven guilty.
Right.
Very serious allegations. Do you go back and you say to yourself, there's a couple of times in my interactions with him, my past with him, things that I've seen, heard from him, that maybe you look at a little bit differently?
I don't think so. Like I said, whenever I was around him, it was when we were filming. So I didn't really... It's very interesting. I have a big family, sure, but we weren't very close. They didn't know me as like a person. They knew me as what was allowed to be shown to them. And so I got to know them on a very surface level. Even years of them filming with me and all the things that we did together, and me filming with them, I literally knew them on a surface level. It was the weather, it was how pretty their skirts were, it was, our conversations were what we were told to talk about. So we never really discussed, what we were struggling with or what we were learning or just the inner workings of who we are. I didn't even know their like favorite color, if that gives you just an idea of kind of how level of service it was. And so I think that because I haven't been around in 5-6 years, a lot can change. A person can change. I don't believe,
true.
now here's what I don't believe. I don't believe that someone at 25 years old, goes to a beach vacation and decides to become a monster just randomly, on a family vacation,
Right.
allegedly. I don't believe that is the start of something. I think that we have to look at generational trauma. You have to look at patterns and you have to disrupt them. And so that's what I've had to do with my family is say, hey, boundaries are very important and I'm not going to allow this to involve my inner family. I'm going to keep them safe and keep peace intact. And I'm going to just stand up for truth, stand up for what is right. And I don't know where it began with Joe. I don't know where it began with Josh, but I have a lot of questions, just like everyone else.
100%. And I will tell you, one of the things that surprised me, and I'm curious what your reaction to it was, and maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way, but since the aftermath of his arrest and the charges, I've seen a number of members of the family issue public statements where it wasn't like he's completely innocent, he didn't do this. There seems to be an acknowledgement, at least saying, again, he's innocent to prove guilty, but they seem to say that he did it, and they hope that he heals, and they hope they learn from it. I was a bit surprised by that. I mean, did you see the same thing where they're saying, you know, what this is about the victim in this case? Not even they say alleged victim, they say victim, that he needs help. I thought that was interesting to see that response from the family.
Does legal-specific AI really make a difference? See it in action with an up-close look at how Ask I Manage helps you create consistent and defensible output grounded in your documents. See the Ask I Manage difference in action.
Diagnosed with Crohn's disease and struggling with your symptoms? It's not too soon to talk to your doctor about Entyvio for moderate to severe Crohn.
Help. I thought that was interesting to see that response from the family.
I thought it was very interesting as well. I saw my uncle's response. I saw some of the brothers' responses. I also think it's interesting because, yes, they're showing support as for him to get help and for him to, you know, get saved or, you know, to change his ways or whatever. But at the same time, I've heard that there is a lot of support happening behind the scenes. And I hope that the, you know, comments and supportive emails going out to, you know, the media and everything like that actually stands, because I hope it's not a PR, you know, plug-in.
Right.
I feel like that the media can spin things, and I feel like allegedly they can spin things, and so I just hope that he does. I hope he pays for whatever it might be. If he is guilty and he has done these things, then, you know, punish him to the fullest amount.
Amy, I got to ask you about Joshua. So this was interesting. His time in prison has been extended, apparently reportedly put in solitary. You believe you know why that happened, right?
I mean, I believe that he had a cell phone. Isn't that correct? Then he had another cell phone.
So I'm curious about it, because I've seen some reporting where it suggested, like, we don't know what the potential violations were. Do you have some more information as to what, if there were violations or why it was extended or what happened here? Because I don't think we've gotten an official reason why.
No, I don't think that we've gotten an official why either. And even, you know, I put on my social media, because everybody comes to me for answers, because I'm the outspoken one that they're like, hey, you were there. Yeah. Tell us more. And I'm like, I'm finding out just like you guys are. I assume, though, it is probably because of a cell phone. That's just my take. That's my guess on it. And it's because it's happened before. You know, I do believe that he thinks he's above the law. I do think that he thinks I can get away with whatever. You know, I'm Josh Duggar, you know, that whole thing. And I do think that pride goes before a fall. And so, yeah, I do think it was probably a cell phone. I have no proof of that whatsoever. But it just makes you wonder who gave it to him, how did he get it, and what's he doing with it? What's he looking up? I've got questions. I have so many questions.
How do you feel about the fact that he'd spend more time in prison?
Oh, I'm celebrating it. I hope he stays there until his children are 18 years or older. Yeah.
By the way, just talking about being locked up, one of the things that we covered on this show, just going back to Joseph and Kendra, a lot of their phone calls were released. I don't know if you had an opportunity to listen to any of them.
I heard them all.
What'd you think of them?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, how much time do you have, Jesse?
You tell me.
Let me tell you. They were so sad. They were so sad. I felt, this is my own opinion, but I felt like Joseph was extremely selfish in those situations. He wasn't showing any concern for Kendra. You know, Kendra had to ask, like, do you still love me? And like, I'm like, in my head, I'm screaming like, Kendra, do you love yourself? Do you love yourself? Here's someone allegedly that might have hurt a 9-year-old. Do you love yourself enough to break free? You know, I've said this in other podcasts, but this is her time to shine, right? She can protect those children. She can get out of that situation if it's correct, if it's, you know, guilty verdicts, all the things. And I just don't know what's going to happen. I hope to God that she widens up and she really sees it for what it is.
Did you also get the sense that they were very careful not to explain the substance of the charges because they know it's not recorded. I mean, it says it's a recorded line. But did you get a sense that about how they may be approaching the Arkansas charges, like what their perception of it may be, how they view it?
Well, I know that I saw emails that were from my uncle that said it's ridiculous that Kendra was charged. It's ridiculous that she was arrested. Like, we're going to see if we can get those dropped, like that kind of stuff. But again, think about the meter of how to protect a child, right? Like, what is good, what is bad, and where do you draw the line of saying, like, okay, I'm a good parent if I feed my kids. I'm a good parent if I, protect my kids from predators, allegedly. What, like, where's that line at? Because I think it starts with making sure they're safe, protected, loved, and cared for every single day of their life. And if they're not, then we need to look deeper into the situation. My heart goes out to those children. I've never met them, but my heart goes out to them so much. And I just hope that they're safe wherever they are.
Amy, you've been so generous with your time and really being so open about this. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with our viewers and our listeners so they can get your perspective on all this. But thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Jesse.
Thank you again to Amy Duggar King. Really appreciate it. And thank you all out there for following us here on this case. That's all we have for you.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. Thank y'all for being here today. Thank you to Smell the Roses for being here. I'm not sure whoever else was here. Thank you for being here. Like, share, subscribe. Please, please enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.